1 Kings 22. This is talking about the death of Ahab. And these are fig trees. They want to get their leaves back flat. The palm tree that you see over here is the first year. So it's a seasonal flat. What time of year it is?
It's pretty deep. It's a tomb of Omri Ahab here in Samaria. Right there, that entrance. This hill of Samaria is pretty big. It's a pretty big heap of ruins. The locals are trying to sell Roman, Byzantine, and Greek coins. Try to sell it for $100 a pop. Pretty pricey. It's pretty cool though. Mount Gerizim.
They're not in a perfect line or anything like that, but that's one interpretation, that they were used somehow for the structure. They're interesting, and they've just excavated over on the other side. They're on that side as well. They were the first stakes. Yeah, yeah, you can see them all through here on this side and on the other side, especially
Some of them were just trial and error.
Some of them are
shields?
Yes, they are.
Yeah, that'll mess around.
Make sure you take a picture of that sign right here.
Make sure you do.
Take a picture of it. It says Allahu Akbar, mostly. Allah is the greatest. Okay.
So they do recognize the difference.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. Well,
In the States, they try not to.
well, both groups are proud of their identities, trying to make sure everybody knows.
So they're purposely trying to drown
Oh,
out
yeah,
the
yeah.
big guys.
Okay, let's go there and try to take a spot where I'll try to introduce you to the temple now. I'll start with explaining what is that we hear, because it distracts some people a lot. Did you see the Jewish group that went just before us on the left hand side? Well, that's what happens when a Jewish group deliberately decides to go on the top of the Temple Mount, regardless of the signs and notes that we saw that Jews are not allowed to go on the Temple Mount, signed by Chief Rabbi. The Chief Rabbi of Israel says Jews are not allowed to go to the Temple Mount. Why? Because Jews are not ritually clean. They've been in contact with a dead body one way or another, and since the red heifer as an animal is extinct and they cannot burn it and add the ashes to water and then make all the Jews ritually clean, that's why the rabbis decided that Jews cannot go in the Temple Mount, not to desecrate the entire precinct. Because the rabbis are not sure where exactly the Holy of Holies was, and so in order not to desecrate it with your dirty feet, you are not allowed to. Yet Jews do come, and as you saw it, and I believe personally that this is some kind of provocative action that Jews are deliberately taking to make. And so when they come up to the Temple Mount, that causes a massive counter-reaction from the Muslims who are here. You heard them crying something, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, well, which means Allah is the greatest, and they gather around the Jewish group and they follow them all around the Temple Mount, crying that non-stop. Why? The Muslims think that Jews are here to pray, and so in order not to let them pray, they start chanting their own things in Arabic, which distracts Jews from prayer, even the silent prayer. Whether it is true or not, it's hard for me to say, but that's what the situation is right now. And this was, by the way, a very mild version. Normally there's like a bunch of women that surround the Jewish group and they chant in a very high-pitched voices. You can hear them from half a mile apart. And then, of course, there are Israeli soldiers that also surround the Jewish group for their own protection. So I'm glad that the group went out that way. or a token which has an image of that animal or a word written, and then they would go up to the temple, the precinct, and that's where they would burn the sacrifice. On the top of this platform, that's where the altars were. And we're gonna go up there and
Are these Muslim guards?
yes, they are. Okay, guys, come here. The guards told me, which I already know and which I also tell each and every person that I bring here, we're not allowed even to look as if we are praying or worshiping. So guys, don't even try to, okay? They will see you doing some certain things like that or like that, and they will run to us and they will take us out. So yeah, that's how bad it is sometimes. Let's step
Did you say
aside.
women should put something on their
Yeah,
heads?
because you have long hair that kind of distracts certain Muslim people. Just out of the way and that's it. Yeah. So far, we're doing okay. We don't have a crowd of crazy Arab ladies chanting Allahu Akbar, so we're good. So guys, this area is the area where only priests and Levites would go. No common people up here. And so that's where the altars would be, and that's where they will burn the sacrifice. However, it was one level more in terms of access. Only one person in the entire country could go to that area, and only once a year. And you can of course tell me that there was a high priest, and the day was the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur. He would go inside the Holy of Holies somewhere over that area. No other priest or Levite would be able to do that. And so we went through the court of Gentiles, ladies' court, court of men's court, the holy precinct where priests and Levites would stay, and of course, since none of us are high priest, and today is not a Yom Kippur, and besides we're not too sure where Holy of Holies were, we shall not go any further. We'll stop by those walls. And this is the structure which I think you, John, mentioned before. Is this the fourth holiest site? I said it is a holy site, but somehow it's out. It's set aside from that system 1, 2, 3, and so on and so forth. This is a very holy site for the Muslims, yet it is not a mosque. They do not go there to pray. They go inside just, I guess, to be closer to a very holy place, because they believe exactly that was the spot where Muhammad ascended to heaven, from the top of that rock of creation. Okay, let's move.
This place is bigger than it looks from pictures. It's pretty in here.
Saudi Arabia. And so technically this is a Muslim precinct, and that's why I'll talk about Muslim traditions of messianic expectations. They Muslims believe that there will come a time where Messiah will return. They believe that Messiah was here, but he will return. And this Messiah, his name is Jesus. Muslims believe that Jesus will return, but not as God, but as a messenger. The Messiah for them is a messenger. So when he comes, there will be massive resurrection of the dead. That's why Muslims, just like Jews, bury their dead that way, because Messiah will set his feet on the top of Mount of Olives, and they also want to be first in line once that happens. However, the first best spot has already been taken by the Jews, so they have second best option. And so when that happens, when there will be a massive resurrection of the dead, there will be a narrow bridge cast from the top of Mount of Olives down to the Temple Mount. It will be very narrow and sharp as a blade of a sword, Muslims believe. And so all the resurrected souls have to walk that bridge. The righteous ones will make it. The not so righteous will fall down and into the fires of hell. And before they actually be burned, they will be hung by their necks in the flights of these arches that you can see all around. So that's why Muslims call these arches arches of the judgment. I guess there'll be a huge line of people waiting when that happens, because arches are just a few. But that's how Muslim traditions are. Now, let's walk through the arches before we get struck. These are people that are actually hired by the Muslim trust, the Waqf, the monthly salary, to stay here on the top of the Temple Mount for one specific reason. And this reason is Jewish. If the Jews come to the Temple Mount, those people, it's their job to run on those Jews, surround them, chant Allah Akbar non-stop before the Jews actually leave the land, in order to distract Jews from prayer. So that's how sad the reality of Temple Mount of today is. That's just people.
So,
Corrupt pretty much everything.
so those guys are probably hired?
Yeah, all of them are. So they come here with their lunch boxes, and they have hot coffee, sandwiches, and they keep an eye for the Jews. Yes.
They must tell them at the office. That's what they're stalling for.
Oh,
make
absolutely. They know. They have radio stations, and even if they don't, you can hear Muslim women from quite afar chanting, "Not going back." Well, that's something, and we're kind of blessed that it doesn't happen right here, right now. Otherwise, it's a very good for taking a video of, but it's not so pleasant to be standing next to. But what is pleasant to be standing next to is this structure, which is a gate. Of course, it's an Ottoman Turkish gate, but it stands at the same spot where another gate once stood. That gate is called the Golden Gate, or Gate of Mercy, or Gate Beautiful, or Shushan Gate. There are lots of names. That place sometimes associated with Jesus. It's a wrong thing to do. When we read the Gospel, we read about Jesus' triumphant entry. Some Christians, in fact most of the Christians, believe that the Golden Gate was the gate where Jesus entered the city. And this would be here. However, there is one problem with this theory. The Golden Gate was not a city. It was a temple gate. And this gate was only used once a year by two creatures. One of them human, the other one not so human. The human creature was the high priest. The not so human creature was a goat. And they used that gate to exit the Temple Mount once a year. Of course, that was the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur, and the goat is a scapegoat. All the sins of the nation were put on that goat, for a poor animal, and the priest would lead the goat through that gate and let him go. If the goat makes it alive to the top of Mount of Olives without falling or breaking its leg or whatever, it means that the sins have been atoned, and the nation of Israel can start breathing again for the next year. If not, then the end is nigh, as they say. Fortunately for the Jews of that time, all the goats obviously made it. So,
That's the term scapegoat.
yes, scapegoat. And so that is it. Jesus never was able to walk through that gate, either in or out. However, the gates of the city were somewhere else. God is willing, we shall be very close to that area later today when we shall go to the city of David, or Jebus of Canaanites, or Jerusalem of Jesus' days, the lower city of Jerusalem, and that's where the gates were. So when he rode that white donkey along the Kidron Valley, which is just outside these walls facing east, he went down to where the gates were, and that's where he entered the city, not through here.
I could fund the ministry for a few years.
They give a 40% discount.
I have a coupon.
saying there used to be. And then Saturday with the snow, we lost the nose on the skull. And it's sitting down in the rocks down at the bottom. But the yellow part you see, and then below it looks like almost like a cave, and there's a little bit of a mound going up. That was joined, and last week you would have seen sort of the two eye holes. That's all that's left. When I started coming here over 35 years ago, it looked much like this. Why is it disappearing so quickly? Because this hard rock, with the buses coming in vibrating with the pollution, the hard surface has been breaking off over the years, and now there's nothing to protect it, and it will disappear quite quickly. Okay? So we have that there, but why did I say we don't know the place and we're really not worried about it? When I was 6 years old, I went downstairs one night. I still remember doing it, and I said to my dad, "Daddy, I want to know how I can go to heaven." It's probably because I was being so bad, I thought the chances were really going to slow. I'm glad my dad, when he sat me on his knee, didn't say, "Gordy, when you get old, you need to save some money, and you need to go to Israel, and you need to find Golgotha and Yatun and Capernaum and all of those wonderful places." You see, if you were able to find the exact places Jesus had been, and that's all you found, you don't have anything unless you found the places. So here are the made sort of a fountain-looking thing there. So when groups come, they say, "Well, how did the wine come out of the wall?" It didn't. It was just a decoration. It confuses people. So you step on the grapes here, the juice goes into the tank. This is not a mom and dad operation. You get a couple of jugs of wine. This is a big wine press. The tank holds over 100 gallons of juice. It's filled up. Then you take the pulp away, you bucket out the juice, and you start over again. So it either belonged to a rich man or this man had a serious drinking problem. Because that's a lot of wine. Okay? So we know this would have all been a vineyard. Okay? So we're going to go down to the tomb. We're going to go buy the wine press. On the way, we're going to go buy this. You won't be able to see right down into it. And this isn't old. It's old for us in North America. But it's only 1,000 years they can date it back. When they tested the plaster, because the stone leaks, the stone is porous like here, we go through the seams, so they have to plaster it. The Crusaders were down in here. This thing holds 250 gallons of water. And maybe there was one before that. The Crusaders put a Crusader cross down there. I've been in the cistern when it's empty. And maybe it's first century. Crusaders find it's leaky, they plaster it. And so, but if you build a cistern that holds 250,000 gallons, you got to water something. Okay? So they fitted in that they had a garden here as well. So we're going to go down there. You're going to be able to look down. It looks like a chimney. You're going to look about 20 feet down and you're going to see this window. And it's 40 by 60 feet at the bottom. I mean, it is huge. Okay? But it doesn't prove this Joseph Arimathea is from the first century. Any questions? Sorry. Give you some explanation on it too. Now we'll let them get out of the way. Sometimes it's a little more heavy on guess. Well, for some reason, an archaeologist. A little more heavy on guess than education. I mean, if you find a coin somewhere and you see the Caesar's head, you know when the coin was made, but you don't know how long it's been there, right? You found another coin somewhere else and you're trying to compare, and so archaeologists try to help us here. Part of the problem is archaeologists come, some of them date this tomb from hundreds of years before the time of Christ. Some of them date it 500 years after. Some of them date it first century. Okay? We don't know. Because they're trying to look at things and compare. But what do they tell us? Well, they tell us the Byzantines were here, and we know that from a couple other things than just them. Byzantines are here between the years 400 and 600. They have a church called the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, right? In the old city. And it's there to celebrate crucifixion, burial, and resurrection of Jesus. And when they're here, they believe they made a chapel in front of it. You see those two sort of pockets up above and to the left of where the guy was at the door there. And there would have been another set on the right where it's all orangey or rusty, where it's broken out. And when you go down, be really careful, because there are cuts in that bedrock that you're not allowed to fix. The English people own the garden. The Israeli antiquities tells them what to do. Okay? You can't take something 2,000 years old and you can't fill in the cuts in the rock. Standing there and I was standing there, and she stepped back to take a picture. She went in this way and shattered her wrist.
Ooh.
We took her out of here in an ambulance. So I'm very me show you what they wrote on the outside. And I'll hold my finger there after. Because otherwise you'll take the picture and get home and say, what was that of? See the box cross? The Byzantines? You see it comes down here, top of the anchor, and this is the hook of the anchor. Okay? So this is a Byzantine symbol. And I can hold my finger if any of you want to get a picture. You got them? It might help. Okay. Any questions?
Yeah, there's a guy named Ron Wyatt.
Yeah.
Are you aware of his story about they came and said there was a post driven in, a seal kind of post, metal that went in?
Ron Wyatt came and he asked to be able to dig at the garden tomb. And he dug a big hole over here and said he found the Ark of the Covenant and a few other things. Only problem was, the whole time Ron Wyatt was here, because he found the chariot wheels and all of those things, they had somebody with him all the time. And from the garden, he didn't find a thing. So, unfortunately, Ron Wyatt said he found a lot of things. And he realized, because the garden tomb were going to publish that he wasn't telling the truth, he withdrew those things. Okay? So, it's unfortunate because we have people coming, and you hate to say, we're pretty certain he was a bit of a fraud. He's dead now.
But the stone that was there wasn't found or anything like that. It was
Never been
all
found.
just all
He
the
never
stone.
owned it.
Okay.
No. So you can go ahead happy, you go in at a time. Feel free to take pictures of it.
This is the track.
This would be the track of the stone, so you get a feeling. It might have even had a bevel on the front to stop it moving. I mean, that's a huge stone.
Far more than a couple hundred pounds.
Oh, yeah, no, it probably would have, if this is the height of the door, then the stone would have had to come up a bit more to cover the corners and everything. But even still, the stone's only that high from the track, that's 4 feet. Yeah, 4 feet by 18 inches. This one, what?
That he showed, was it a bigger diagram?
No, this is it.
Just checking. that rock. What do you think that is, Bill?
I think they call it the stone that it is dressed with. They all touch it.
It's pretty small. Be careful.
Whoa.
That's when she and the Patriarch of Jerusalem's Phineas made up a special committee, and they were leading the excavation party. And after they discovered the tombs underneath the ruins of the shrine dedicated to Venus the Aphrodite, she and the Patriarch made a willful decision to choose one single tomb, isolated from the rest of the burial grounds, from the rest of the cemetery. And that tomb was turned into a chapel. We just walked past it. The area we're here at right now was discovered back in the 1970s accidentally when the wall collapsed. We found a series of burial tombs, which archaeologists, 95% of them who do excavations here, probably in a matter of time, will open those tombs for the public. So like I said, the first original building was made in 325 AD, and it was twice the size of the church in the Holy Sepulchre we see today. Now, as we entered on the right-hand side, there was a small door which we will pass by yet once again, and this door leads to a staircase which brings you up to the Golgotha. Golgotha is a small hill in front of a bigger hill which was used as a fort, and then later was used as a burial compound. So within the walls of the same church we have Golgotha and we have the tomb itself. The tomb you see right here. What Queen Helena and her builders did, they chiseled almost the entire hill away. They isolated the one tomb that they decided to call the tomb. They covered this cave, isolated cave, with marble slabs and gave it a shape of a chapel. And that's the chapel that we see right here.
What made him decide it was that tomb?
I'm sorry?
What made him decide on that?
What made them decide that tomb? I wish I knew. That's the honest answer. Like I said, if you read Eusebius, the Bishop of Caesarea's book about this, he leaves this argument out, and I personally think that's a shame. If he gave the argument, the true argument why, it would have been perfect. He describes how they identified the true cross, because at the bottom of the hill, in a pit, Queen Helena and her builders found 3 crosses. And then they brought all the sick and paralytics from Jerusalem, and they start putting them on that cross, 3 crosses. And from one cross, all of a sudden, everybody got healed. That's how she knew that that was the true cross, which was a holy relic in this church in the Kingdom of Jerusalem for many years to come. Pieces of that cross they were selling to everywhere else in the world. And I wish Eusebius would give the same kind of story for the discoverer of the tomb. He does it. And so,
obviously. Crusaders made these crosses.
majority of archaeologists do agree that this was the courtyard of the high priest's house. And as we read the scripture, according to the archaeologists, this is the level where this could have happened. How do they know? A valid question, of course. They found potsherds with the names on them, and they believe those sherds are the lots that priests took in order to determine whose turn it is to serve at the temple.
We're gonna build a parking garage. Going down to Hezekiah's tunnel.
Here is where the floors get uneven and wet. Indeed. So be careful not to drop your camera, because if you drop it, that's it.
You're gonna go get it for us, right?
No.
Oh my, don't tease me.
Okay, let us stop here and wait till everybody is here.
It's like that scene out of.
Get used to it.
No, I didn't do that. It's like the scene from The Great Outdoors. You touched me. What is the touching me for all is good? It wasn't before.
There was plenty of room down below, so guys, make room for the people at the back. The reason I stopped us here is I wanted you to take a look at the shaft that Charles Warren dug in order for him to reach the area of King Hezekiah's tunnel. That's he discovered. Okay, and once you are down there, you can take a picture and then continue going up. Still, please be careful. The floors are uneven and they're wet.
How did he know this is where he is?
He didn't know originally. Okay, after he surveyed the area, he decided that there must be something down there below, and so he started digging a shaft. And he hit it accidentally, and then it led to a very important discovery.
This is a great way to make money.
I didn't say that. Okay, you didn't hear that from me.
When I first you had to pay an Arab boy a shekel to enter through the iron gate.
Okay, watch that film with
Footsteps.
this area grows year after year. Most likely none of it you saw in the pictures.
No, we entered right into the water tunnel, and that was it.
I know, that's weird. Even though it's not that cold, really.
Of course, man, it's all modern. This is all brand new. Yes. Yeah, they were working on it, and now it is. You can see it. Can you hear the waters running? If you listen closer. This is, yeah, the system that was protecting the spring.
That wall, I think, is this wall.
Here, let's get a picture.
Well, the blue sky of Hezekiah's tunnel. And we are traveling through a Canaanite sewage system. Yeah. Kidron Valley. These are Nehemiah walls overlooking the Kidron Valley.
Majority of it is covered with debris, as you can see, because it belongs to the Greek Orthodox monastery on the other side of the fence. And the Greeks are not willing to sell it to the City of David foundations. Yeah, of course they're not. And also, another part of it is owned by a monk. See some steps which led to the pool. Right now, unfortunately, the pool is filled with mud. So in this case,
We could come like really close, because this is going to be kind of hard to show, but I want to try to do this quickly so that we can move on. But again, archaeology, we've been talking about a tell, and we've been talking about these different layers stacked on top of each other, and so on and so forth. And so we have different layers here for Jerusalem. So this is the city layout from the time of Herod the Great. You all saw the model at the museum, and there's two main features. Yeah, come in here so that you can see. There's two main features if you're looking from a bird's eye view at the Jewish city at the time of Herod the Great. Of course, the Romans are in control, but it's the Jewish city of Jerusalem. And there's two main dominant features. One, of course, is the temple and the Temple Mount, okay, which is, of course, the spiritual center of the city. And then the other is the palace of Herod the Great. And I'll call it the palace complex, because if you'll remember, when you were looking at the thing, it's fortified off. The whole complex is fortified off from the rest of the city. That makes sense, right? Because Herod the Great's not the most popular guy, and if there's a big revolt from the city to try to overthrow him, you're going to want a fortification wall around where you live. And you're also going to want the barracks in there. You're going to want your soldiers with you inside that fortification area. And if it gets out of hand and they start breaking through the walls and everything, you're going to want an escape route, aren't you? And that's what we're standing in here, is the gate, the only gate that led outside of the city. Now, how do we know that it's the only gate that led outside of the city? It's because they excavated from Jaffa Gate all the way to where the wall ends here, and where Herod the Great's fortification wall ends, and they found one gate. Now, when my professor was on this dig, he put his lunch in that arrow slot way the heck up there. You see the discoloration in the, that's where the dirt level was, up where it gets darker up there, right below that arrow slot. All the way along this, all the way to that level, you can imagine how much material we're dealing with. A ton of material. Now, this is something important. They already knew what they were going to find before they ever dug. They didn't know where. Maybe it'd be down over there, or maybe it'd be over. They didn't know exactly where, but they knew they would find a gate with a stone pavement and something that matches the descriptions that are in the Gospel of John. We talk about using an ancient text in one hand and then the archaeology on the other hand to interpret what's being found. In this case, they were using John's Gospel. Okay, now I just want to point something out while I got these. Okay, so in Herod the Great, here's his city laid out, and here's where Golgotha is. You went to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre yesterday. Here's the tomb, right, the first century tomb area of where Jesus was buried. Okay, then after that, 70 AD destruction came along. This was all destroyed and laid in rubble, and then built over the top of that, Hadrian comes along and he builds Aelia Capitolina over the top of it. The way that you build a Roman city is you pick your main central temples or temple, and then you build lay out the rest of the city around that. Okay, so this is where he chose to put in his temple. Was it a temple of Jupiter and a temple of Venus? Was it a double temple? Was it a temple of Jupiter with a statue of Venus? They argue about all that stuff, but it was the main Roman pagan temple of Aelia Capitolina. With the forum, see the main forum next to it, and so on and so forth. The Cardo Maximus is laid out in relationship to the temple. Do you see that? It's the center of, now the spiritual center of Roman pagan Jerusalem, called Aelia Capitolina. Okay, now the Byzantines come, and the Byzantine period starts, and now this is what the Byzantine city looks like, which is still laid out roughly the same way as Aelia Capitolina. Only you see this and connects to this part of the gate, so this is all fortified off from the rest of the outside of the city, or outside of the gate. Comes in and connects to here, then the gate continues. You see this patch of Herodian stones over here from the Herodian time period? See what I'm talking about? That's sticking out from the wall with the budges. Here, I'll go talk. Point to it. Right here. See? This patch, that's from the time of Herod the Great. All the rest of it is later, but this patch survived. We know exactly where the gate went because look, you come up through the gate and then preserved in this bedrock right here are the steps that went into the gate. See what I'm talking about? Okay, now let's come over and look at this diagram, which was drawn up by my professor based on what was found here in the excavation. So you have this wall, you see the gates out here. Those are those gates right there. You see this wall right here. We saw the base of the wall right here. And then this is drawn too high in this drawing because you come out of this gate right here, and then they found stone pavement where you're standing. This is the problem with archaeology. It in itself is destructive, especially when you find a floor. If you find in an excavation a stone paved floor, what are you going to do? You're going to rip it out. Why? Because you got to be really careful to try to look for coins and things underneath it, because that's going to date the construction of that floor. You always rip it out. And when it's ripped out, you can't see it anymore. But you got stone pavements right here. I'm going to show you a remnant of what it looked like, right, when it was excavated. Look at this. Here's the stone pavement left in situ where it was found. You see it? So this came out like this. Across this whole area was stone paved. And then from that stone pavement, you came up stairs that were also ripped out, that went up there to another stone pavement. That's the main area that's stone paved up here. Then they found a judgment seat, a bama or a bema, up on top, which is where the Roman governor would come out of the palace and come and address a crowd outside of the Roman stronghold. Would Jews go into the Roman stronghold? No, they wouldn't want to go into the Roman stronghold. So the Roman governor, to address them, would have to come out and speak to them. Okay? Now, very clearly there might have been, and probably was, a gate that also led to the inside of the city from this complex. Do you see that? Probably that's the case, because Josephus says gates. Stone pavement. Okay? All through here. And then this is the bema. Right here. As it was found in archaeology. So here I would be addressing the crowd out there. You see it? Okay, now, this is one of the stones that was found actually on this side of the bema. You see it? Does it remind you of anything? Huh? Okay, let me, you've been to Dan, right? You remember going into the Iron Age gate at Dan, and there's the bema there, the bama, that where the king sat. You remember that? And address the people. Do you remember these things on either side of it, that to give that area shade? That's what this is. Same thing. So the Iron Age example of that, this is the 1st century BC example of that. Okay, does everybody understand? So for what we're going to read, the palace is inside here, and Pontius Pilate is talking to Jesus, and then he's coming out that gate, and he's coming up here, and he's addressing the crowd of the Jews out in front of him. Okay, now all we got to do is read the biblical text, and we'll get it. The 18 verse 28. I'm going to kind of skip through this so that we can kind of move on. Verse 28. Then the Jews led Jesus from Caiaphas to the palace. Okay, the traditional house of Caiaphas is just over here on the north side. The material that we're going through in the building in here in the Armenian Quarter is also from the excavations at the house of Caiaphas. To the palace of the Roman governor. Again, we have an extra biblical source, Philo, who says Pontius Pilate rules from Herod the Great's palace. By now it was early morning, and to avoid ceremonial uncleanness, the Jews did not enter the palace. They wanted to be able to eat the Passover. Okay, so that makes sense, right? The Jews aren't going to go into the Roman stronghold here. Remember, there's the royal garden in front of the palace too, with all the statues and statuettes and so forth. So Pilate came out to them and asked, "What charges are you bringing against this man?" So he comes here what charges are you bringing against this man? And then they go into all of this, and it really comes down to the question in verse 37. They bring the charges. He goes back into the palace and he says, are you the king? That's the first question that he has to Jesus. Are you the king? And of course, Jesus talks about his kingdom not being of this world, and so on and so forth. Verse 38, what is truth? Pilate asked. With this he went out again to the Jews and said, I find no basis for a charge against him. And then we'll skip over to chapter 19. Then Pilate took Jesus and had him flogged. Probably this flogging most likely happened in front of the barracks, just inside of the gate in here. The soldiers twisted together a crown of thorns and put it on his head. They clothed him in a purple robe and went up to him again and again, saying, Hail, King of the Jews! And they struck him in the face. Once more Pilate came out and said to the Jews, so he came out again and said to the Jews, Look, I am bringing him out to you to let you know that I find no basis for a charge against him. When Jesus came out, wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe, Pilate said to them, Here is the man. Can you just imagine 2,000 years ago, Jesus coming out of that gate right there, and being brought up here on display with the robe and the crown of thorns? Here is the man. As soon as the chief priests and their officials saw him, they shouted, Crucify, crucify! But Pilate answered, You take him and crucify him. As for me, I find no basis for a charge against him. The Jews insisted, We have a law, and according to that law he must die because he claimed to be the Son of God. When Pilate heard this, he was even more afraid, and he went back inside the palace. Where do you come from? So 2 questions, right? Are you the king? Are you a king? And where do you come from? And of course, Jesus talks about his heavenly kingdom. And verse 12, from then on, Pilate tried to set Jesus free, but the Jews kept shouting, If you let this man go, you are no friend of Caesar. Anyone who claims to be a king opposes Caesar. When Pilate heard this, he brought Jesus out and sat down on the judge's seat at a place known as the Stone Pavement, which in Aramaic is Gabbatha. It was the day of preparation of Passover week, about the 6th hour. Here is your king, Pilate said to the Jews, but they shouted, Take him away, crucify him. Shall I crucify your king? Pilate asked. We have no king but Caesar. Okay, now I want to stop there just for a second because this is important. I want you to remember when we were in Samaria. Remember the temple in Samaria that Herod the Great built to Caesar Augustus, the Caesar at that time, who's still living, who's being worshipped, sacrificed to as a god. So you can imagine, do you see?
Here we are in Gezer. Oops. That way is north. Wait, no, that way is south. That way is north. There's Tel Aviv.
Okay, since this is your last day, this is your archaeology test. Look this over and tell me what it is.
Steely.
Give it a good looking over.
It's a gate.
I'll get out my a lot of sites.
We do things other than drink.
Yeah. There you go. Well, I think he did some drinking here too.
Really, yeah.
There's archaeological evidence that he did some drinking here during his archaeology. Anyways, McAllister is in the early days. Back then, the archaeology technique wasn't as good as it is now, but boy, their interpretations, in my opinion, were much better than they are now, because they had a high degree of respect for the Bible and were using the Bible to interpret what they were finding in the ground. So the first thing we want to do at this site is look at what was found here in the ground, the facts, and then we'll look at how McAllister interpreted it, and then we'll look at the modern take on it. So let's huddle up here and see this site. So he found this site. Here's his top plan, McAllister's top plan of what he found. The city wall is running right over there, and so we're inside of the city wall of Gezer, Canaanite Gezer. Let me show you this. See, this is his side view of what it looked like as he was going into this archaeological layer. So you can see these standing stones, most of them, there's 10 of them, were already standing. Okay? They're already standing. So he dug around them and found what you can see today. He found this stone, very interesting. It's got a basin cut into it. Okay, so he's going to have to interpret that. Now, that's what we can see. Now let's see what was taken during the excavations of what was found here. First of all, this bronze serpent was found right next to one of these standing stones. These are very, very common. You can see that it's a cobra. Also, in association with this were a bunch of idols. It's very politically incorrect to call them idols today, but I'll call them idols. Were found through here that are Asherah idols, the fertility goddess. This snake idol is often found in the same context, and then also Moloch. So if you believe in many gods, then you have to answer the question, well, which one is the greatest God? Which one is the most powerful? Who's in control? I need to know who's in control, right? And Moloch is the king of the Canaanite pantheon, and his counterpart. Yeah.
Thank you. A child. Cut in half.
So listen to this. In this, in a jar that has been burned. Okay. So now let's look at the top plan again. These are these jar buried infants marked with a J. Look at them all. J, 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 J. You see what I mean? They're buried all throughout this high place. Now let's start getting into the interpretation, okay? And for the interpretation, instead of reading McAllister, I don't really need to. What I need to do is read the Bible. He interpreted this, Leviticus 18. Would somebody mind here? Let me just throw this in the bag here, just so I. Yeah. Verse 21. This is God giving His law to His people in regards to where they're coming into the midst of the Canaanites. Do not give any of your children to be sacrificed to Moloch, for you must not profane the name of your God. I am the Lord. Okay, if we go over to chapter 20, it talks about if they do this sin, this is what the punishment is going to be. The Lord said to Moses, say to the Israelites, any Israelites or any alien living in Israel who gives any of his children to Moloch must be put to death. The people of the community are to stone him. I will set my face against that man, and I will cut him off from his people. For by giving his children to Moloch, he has defiled my sanctuary and profaned my holy name. If the people of the community close their eyes when that man gives one of his children to Moloch, and they fail to put him to death, I will set my face against that man and his family, and will cut off from their people both him and all who follow him, in prostituting themselves to Moloch. Deuteronomy 12. Hey, I'm going to show you a high place, Moriah. Take your son there and sacrifice him. The local people would have totally understood that. They'd been like, oh yeah, that's what you do. And think about where he went. He went to Moriah, where you were standing on top of the Temple Mount. He took Isaac there, bound him, and remember what Isaac said. He's walking along and he's going, hey, Dad, I see the wood for the fire and I see the knife, but where is the lamb for the sacrifice? And Abraham says, the Lord will provide in this place. And he takes him there and he goes to sacrifice him, and God stops him. And that's where we get this whole other understanding and this whole other theology that we're going down from what the practice of worshiping God is going on all around. But amazingly, there in Jerusalem, this is what God does. The Father allows his Son, who willingly goes and is sacrificed for our sins. Everything to do with this place. That represents what God did for us. This represents who we are, and therefore what we need. And I don't think you understand archaeology. I don't think you understand history. I don't think you understand the Bible unless you understand our deep need. The number one objection to believing the Bible that I hear the most frequently is, oh man, the God of the Old Testament is mean. He's so mean. How can he call for the wiping out of people? Well, it's because they're wiping themselves out. We kill ourselves. We destroy ourselves. And, you know, if somebody is on death row, if you go back home and you find out your neighbor is on death row, what's the first thing you're going to ask? You're going to ask, what did he do? If he stole a car, that's pretty harsh. If he took his children and sacrificed them in a fire, I don't think any of us are going to have a problem with him being on death row, right? Mm. Does the punishment fit the crime? Yes. But thank God, God extended us mercy, which means he gave us what we don't deserve instead of what we do through the sacrifice of his Son, whom he provided for us in the same place, Moriah, the region of Moriah that he sent Abraham to, and the whole story of Isaac. This is the altar where children were sacrificed. Now, this is the majority view, right? In all the places where the same parallel type places are found, the same evidence is found, this is the parallel view until secularism takes over and becomes dominant. And then in the 1960s, it changes. These interpretations, all these earlier interpretations are thrown out. And the interpretation is, no, this doesn't have anything to do with child sacrifice. When you sit in a classroom today, you are taught there is no, see, Roman is agreeing, you are taught there is no evidence for child sacrifice. This in the face of a Phoenician, who, by the way, Phoenicians are Canaanites, who settled in Carthage. We have a cemetery of sacrificed babies there. There's 10,000 of them. And we have early Roman sources that describe what they're doing in sacrificing their children. But no, there's no evidence for child sacrifice. Why? Because from a secular theology, you can't have all men being evil. You can't even have a whole society of people being evil. You can have an evil person, a bad apple running around doing some bad things, but you can't have a nation that's evil. You see what I'm saying? So it became politically incorrect to interpret these things as child sacrifice, as sin, meaning doing the things that God hates, as he says. So I want to go up, and this sign up here tells the visitors who come here what this site is, and I want to go up and read. By the way, I have personally excavated. Okay, we got everybody? So let's come in close so I don't have to yell over the wind, and plus you want to be able to see out this way. We're going to not compete with all these groups of kids. So let's talk a little bit of context first. This is the Elah Valley that's winding around, and then it comes around the backside of the Tell here, and then it goes out to Gath, which we were looking at to the south as we were coming up here. Okay? So it's just kind of snaking around as it works its way up to the mountain ridge. You can see the mountain ridge up there. There was a route that came down from Bethlehem into the Elah Valley and through the Elah Valley. This is the route that David took when he was sent by his son, by his father, Jesse, to deliver food to his brothers who were at war with the Philistines. Okay, now a very important site for the context of what we're going to be reading is, of course, the site that we're standing on, Azekah, which first was excavated by McAllister, the same guy who excavated at Gezer where we just were. It's being excavated by the University of Tel Aviv right now. They're finding some incredible stuff, which they got uncovered over on the other side. I don't think we have time to go snooping around and do that stuff, but anyways, it's over there.
Which way is north?
North is this way. So the other site that's really important is you can see this ridge line that's down below us right here with the bushes and trees on it. You see it? Okay. Right in front of it is a stream, a creek. And that stream is running, and they see that bus down there is crossing it right now. It comes right across the road. You see where I'm talking about? And it comes down the other side and comes through there. So there's a stream that runs right on the face of that hill that's right straight down below us. Across the Elah Valley, you see the road going up through the Elah Valley. See what I'm talking about? And then you see a ridge line on the other side. Everyone see what I'm talking about? So you have that ridge line that goes all the way down, and then it kind of ends, but just beyond it is kind of a bald looking hill over there. You see what I'm talking about? Yes, it's like a yellowish green, and it doesn't have the thick trees on it like the other two ridges have. Does everybody see that? Because that's really important. So that is called Zoko. Tel Zoko. Now Tel Zoko, we know for sure is Tel Zoko because an inscription that says Zoko was found there. And recently it has been excavated for a little bit. And so this is, at the time of the story that I'm about to read, this is what was here. Azekah, Judean city, fortified city. Zoko, Judean city. And then how many ridge lines are between Azekah and Zoko? Two. This one that's closest to us, and the one that's over the farthest. Now, I'm going to read the story and you're going to get it, but just to make sure that you get it, the Israelites are on this closest ridge line. They're encamped on this closest ridge line. Across the Elah Valley, that ridge line that you see over there is where the Philistines are encamped. They're at Zoko, meaning they're on the ridge line associated with Zoko. They're not in the fortified Judean city. Okay? And then keep in mind that there's this stream that comes through here, because that comes into play as well. Okay, here I go. A champion named Goliath, who was from Gath, came out to the Philistine camp. Okay, and then I'll skip over to later in the story. David said to the Philistine, "You come against me with sword." Oh, and he, of course, crosses that stream and picks up his 5 smooth stones. And then he goes out into the Elah Valley between those two ridge lines somewhere. in there to face Goliath. David said to the Philistines, "You come against me with a sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will hand you over to me, and I'll strike you down and cut off your head. Today I will give the carcasses of the Philistine army to the birds of the air and the beasts of the earth, and the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel. All those gathered here will know that it is not by sword or spear that the Lord saves, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give all of you into your hands." As the Philistine moved closer to attack him, David ran quickly toward the battle line to meet him. Reaching into his bag and taking out a stone, he slung it and struck the Philistine on the forehead. The stone sank into his forehead, and he fell face down on the ground. So David triumphed over the Philistine with a sling and a stone. Without a sword in his hand, he struck down the Philistine. Not going to break all the promises that he has made, and he puts 185,000 soldiers to death. They break the siege, and they don't capture Jerusalem alone, that Isaiah says is like a hut in a vineyard. If God had not delivered us, Isaiah says in Isaiah 1, we would have become like Sodom. We would have become like Gomorrah. We would not exist. And
Told every kid.
Cuidado. Salam.
all right, come on down. Okay, so
ديار البلد تعال خليني
Go ahead.
كسب ممنوع التصوير ممنوع التصوير
I don't know what that means.
ممنوع تعطيهم كسب اسمع هذا بتصور سيلفي
Huh?
هيك سيلفي
I don't know what that means.
تعال كيس ماني عربيك ماني انا سبيك عربيك
No. English.
كل واحد شيكل الله يرضى عليكم اعطيه 5 شيكل اعطيه 5 شيكل احلى عنك اعطيه على 5 شيكل
$1. Give me $1.
علم
and also this strip in here.
California.
Then you have this, which is very interesting. You see these structures right here? These structures are from the Iron Age. They're on the outside of the enclosure wall, on the other side of there. You see what I'm talking about? And they are one of the few things. There's a wall right here also from the Iron Age, from the 9th century BC. This is a gate. You see what I'm talking about? When Herod the Great rebuilt this site in the 1st century BC, it completely destroyed whatever enclosure was there from the Iron Age. Okay, but you see that the site goes back even further. And then we have an altar and pottery from the Middle Bronze period. Come in close so you can see the thing. Okay, so let's talk about one thing on top of another.
شو
We go all the way from the time of Abraham with Middle Bronze pottery at this site, all the way to the Iron Age, where there's some kind of enclosure here with the entrance that then is destroyed in the 1st century BC when Herod the Great builds here. Now listen to this. Herod the Great, his subjects, you know who I'm talking about, his subjects, in order to please them, he built up 3 sites. 3 sites only. This is one of them. That's significant. Actually still used today. Do you see the hoses coming out of this with the pump? So this was the water source all the way back to the time of Abraham and before that. So why would this be a good site for Abraham to camp? Because it had a water source, and he has lots of animals that he's got to keep watered, and you got trees here for shade. Okay, now let's walk over and look at a few other things.
Here we are in Hebron.
But today is not a day we do. We usually only had Joe for 2 days. So the day you saw and one other. But this trip, because we canceled Turkey, we had the third day.
One guy Jewish, so they go inside and he was brave with the Muslim. The day is the same thing as he did.
Was it like 20 years ago about her? Sorry?
Okay. You remember these? Remember these from the last site we were at?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, quickly, ladies. One more. Okay, so everyone be seen. So you saw the structure. I'll just let everybody get in here.
Just commemorating the burial of Sarah. Are commemorating the ones that are buried here from the last period. You understand? Okay. You want to heal. Okay, so take a look and then we'll go around to the other side. wait till everybody gets here. And, also for the biblical name of Tel Hebron. And so from Hebron, we have a city right there, and as with all ancient cities, the dead are buried in the rocky ledges and caves that are available around the city. And so this being a burial cave makes perfect sense. You can see a cave down here, and you can see the base of the wall. You can see that this is a prime area for the burial cave that is actually underneath the actual structure of the building. Okay? So, let's see if we can. No, that's where the scrolls are. The scrolls from the biblical books. Instead of in book 1.
So we got the same kind of paintings.
You're probably realizing that Hebron is an extra sensitive place, right? And it certainly is. So there's a lot of history here, and that's what makes it a sensitive place. If there was no history here, if the history wasn't real, nobody would care about this place, and it would be like any other place that nobody cares about. The reason everybody cares and the reason it's so intense is because the history is real and the things really happen. Okay, now let's talk about, I was thinking about what to cover on the way up here. I know that you're probably tired, you're at the end of your trip. There's some middle bronze walls around the corner there. You'll just take my word for it. I think you've seen enough middle bronze walls, haven't you? Okay, so up on the Acropolis, which hasn't been excavated, of the site up here, somewhere up in here would be the Palace of David, from when he ruled from here for 7 years, almost 7 years. The very first verse in the New Testament, Matthew 1:1. A record of the genealogy of Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of David, the son of Abraham. It's what the whole Bible is about. It's about what this land is about. It's about what the history of this land is about. And everything that you look at has to do with that. It has to do with what God has done to save us.